The second generation Audi A8 can be a very appealing used car choice. I mean, it's still a pretty nice car even today. However, there are some issues. There were some issues and there are gonna be some issues with these cars. But in this video, I'm not gonna talk about the general issues. In this video, I'm gonna talk about only the 4.2 liter V8 petrol engines and the issues they can have, because let's be honest, they can have some interesting problems. So, this Audi A8 was available with two 4.2 liter V8 petrol engines. The first has a timing belt and it has a regular port injection, while the newer one has a timing chain and it has a more complex direct injection. Of course, those of you who know something about these cars know that there was also available another V8 petrol engine, but this one was a 3.7 liter V8. However, I'm not gonna mention this engine anymore because it can have the exact same issues as the older 4.2 liter V8. I don't know, should I start with the spark plugs or the faulty ignition coils? I mean, I don't really want to talk about this shit because you should already know about this shit, to be honest. Long story short, if you are gonna replace these spark plugs after maximum 60,000 kilometers, then you are gonna definitely minimize the issues with the faulty ignition coils. Then there is the timing belt, which you should definitely replace in time. In this case, the interval should be every 120,000 kilometers, so you should definitely replace it at the specified interval. But these are just maintenance items and you should already know about this shit. So let's finally start with the more interesting issues. Intake manifold. This engine has a variable intake manifold. The intake manifold itself is usually fine. However, in front of the intake manifold there are some plastic arms or linkages which can break, basically. It's easy as that. But the good thing is that you can replace these linkages very easily and you can buy aftermarket metallic linkages. Next, there is the cam chain tensioner. And I mean, this can be confusing because, as I said, this engine is equipped with a timing belt. And that's true, it has a timing belt. However, it also has chains on the camshafts, which means that on one cylinder head there is a chain and a tensioner on the end of the camshafts. But on the other cylinder head there is also a chain and a tensioner on the end of the camshafts. On one cylinder head the chain and the tensioner is located on the front of the engine, basically, but on the other cylinder head the chain is located at the back of the engine. Now, the chains are usually fine, they are usually not worn, not stretched. However, the chain tensioners can be worn. Plus, not only the tensioner itself, but also the plastic shoes or the plastic rails on this tensioner can get worn to an interesting extent, so they can even fall apart completely. Of course, you can also check these tensioners via the OBD scanner, so I mean, there are various programs for this shit, but you should definitely be prepared to replace these tensioners. Then there are the various leaks which will sooner or later occur on these engines. First, there are the oil leaks. I mean, you can expect the usual oil leaks from the well cover gaskets or from the oil pan, for example. However, there is also an interesting coolant leak. One coolant leak, which is related to the oil cooler, or more specifically to the oil filter housing. Because there is a small plastic pipe connected to the oil filter housing, and this small plastic pipe can crack and leak coolant. Now, the oil filter housing is mounted on the side of the engine, so accessing it and removing it completely is not very easy because you have to remove a bunch of stuff. And because of this, the dealer is gonna most probably remove the whole engine just to replace this small plastic pipe. But a good independent mechanic is able to replace this pipe and remove the oil filter housing without removing the whole engine. So, I mean, yeah, This is not the hardest job, but it's also not the easiest job. But there is a good thing at the end of this shit, and the good thing is that you can buy aftermarket metallic pipe, which is gonna last forever. These engines are not the worst, and with the regular maintenance and with normal, regular, earlier oil changes, it can withstand 300,000 kilometers, 400,000 kilometers. I mean, hell, I have seen numerous examples with 500,000 kilometers even. So these are not the worst engines in the world. Let's move on to the newer 4.2 liter FSI. And again, I'm not gonna even mention the faulty spark plugs, faulty ignition coils. These issues are the same as on the older 4.2 liter V8 and they are basically maintenance items. Let's start with the intake manifold because this engine also has a variable intake manifold. However, in this case, the intake manifold is a much more complicated piece of shit. Long story short, the inside of the intake manifold gets dirty over time. There are numerous plastic flaps in it which can get stuck a bit, plus they can also break and they can also fall apart. Plus, there are two electric motors in front of this intake manifold, or actuators we can call them, and these electric actuators can also fail. However, the only good thing is that all of these issues usually occur just in higher mileage cars, so just after 200,000 kilometers or 250,000 kilometers. Next, there is the timing chain. I mean, the timing chain mechanism in this engine can get worn. If the timing chain gets worn and if it's worn, then you will experience usually that well-known short rattle at cold start. The bad thing is that the timing chain is mounted on the back of the engine, so to replace this timing chain mechanism you will need to remove the whole engine, which means that this is not the easiest, neither the cheapest repair. Next, there are the camshaft adjustment solenoids. There are 4 of them in total and they can fail. However, the good thing is that they are not that hard to replace, they are actually very easy to replace and they are also not that expensive. Next, I should continue with the direct injection related issues. First of all, carbon buildup. In these engines you can experience the well-known direct injection engine flow, the carbon buildup on the intake valves. However, the carbon buildup is usually bigger, more major, only after approximately 200,000 kilometers. But this obviously depends on how the previous owner used the engine and how often he changed the engine oil. Next, there are the injectors. The injectors are also more prone to failure. But long story short, you can expect injector failures, again, usually just after 200,000 kilometers or 250,000 kilometers. Last but not least, there are the high pressure fuel pumps. There are 2 of them and they are mounted on the top of the engine. So the good thing is that replacing them is very easy. The bad thing is that they can leak fuel, slowly leak fuel, so you should definitely check them eventually, sometimes more often. Plus they can also occasionally fail, but mechanically they are usually fine. Next, there are the oil leaks. And again, this engine can leak oil from the regular places, like from the well cover gaskets or from the oil pan, for example. However, it can also leak oil from not that usual places. Like, for example, the bottom of the oil filter housing can leak oil, which is not that positive because you need to remove the whole intake manifold to reach the bottom of the oil filter housing. Then the rear timing chain covers can leak oil and this is less positive because to fix this leak you will need to remove the whole engine. Plus also the oil cooler can leak oil and accessing this oil cooler is also not very easy because it's on the side of the engine and there are many different things around it which you will need to remove basically. I'm not saying that these newer 4.2 liter V8 engines are completely garbage, but after 200,000 kilometers, they can have numerous issues. mainly if the previous owner not changed the oil in time. And under in time, I mean that you should definitely replace the oil in these engines after maximum 8,000 kilometers to at least minimize most of the issues.